that's it for now. We'll be instructing you with everything else on the go. So, Denis, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be hosting this webinar. I have a very ambitious topic, and for 1 hour, it's going to be a challenge to talk about French, Chinese, and Japanese television commercials and how they can best be used in an intercultural training. So I'd like to begin with just saying a few words about who I am. My last name is German. I'm actually a native of St. Louis, Missouri, but I've spent more than half of my life outside of the United States, and I'm an expatriation coach and an intercultural trainer. I am currently living in Paris, France, and I've been there for about 26 years. I've worked for a number of schools and with the government and in a large number of companies. I am trilingual. My native American English. I speak French, Mandarin, Chinese. It's taken me about 16 years to get to the level where I'm at. And I have a good level of Japanese as well. What's my passion? What motivates me? I'm really fascinated by a Chinese culture. And in particular, I'm very interested in Taoism. I'm also a coactive coach, and I'm certified as an organizational relationship and systemic coach. So I lived in Asia for 4 years. Specifically Osaka, Japan, and in Chengdu, China. And at that time, I worked as a language teacher and for a school, but I also worked in the hotel and banking industry. So how do I earn my living? I do half-day conferences in business schools, and I also do training seminars in multinational companies in France. So either with individuals who are going to be working in a Japanese, Chinese company. I also do a lot of welcome to Paris and explain French culture to people from all over the world. So that's a little bit about what I do. And I would just like to share with you this evening my approach. It's a part of my one-day seminar that people really seem to enjoy, and that is using television commercials. So what's on tonight's webinar menu? As an appetizer, I thought I'd say a few words on how do you actually do it? How do you actually find commercials on the web and download them? Talking a little bit about how and when these should be used, for what reasons. And then we'll get to the meat of the seminar, of the webinar, specifically talking about Chinese, French, American, and Japanese ads. And I'd like to ask you a few questions as we go through the webinar, and I'll stop at times to ask you some questions. But I think in the interest of time, it might be best to leave the majority of questions at the end. So this is the menu for tonight. I've just given you just a little icon image of the different products or services that will be the subject of these advertisements. And I've put in a few jokers. I've put in a few questions because I think when you use a television advertisement, sometimes it's best not to say what it is and then let them guess what it might be. And so that's what I'm going to do this evening. Okay, so if you don't use television advertisements, and if you don't know how to download them, it's really quite easy. From your Windows computer, there are a few, if you just in a Google search do YouTube downloader, and you just, that's probably the easiest way to go about it. One of the formats that I've used a lot is VLC because it's just very compatible with a lot of different video formats. And one that I've discovered quite recently that seems to work well, especially in terms of video quality image, would be VK4 Downloader. So another thing that I've just actually discovered about 4 or 5 years ago that made my life so much simpler, and maybe you know about it or maybe you don't, but in case you don't, on any Windows computer, in the menu, you have what's called a snipping tool with the little scissors. And if you click on the new, it will allow you to capture a part of a video image and then cut and paste it onto a Word document or onto a PowerPoint slide. If you want to download an entire video, some of them can be quite long, and you might only want like a 30-second part of a very long video, then there's a tool I use called Snagit, which will actually allow you to shorten and cut and use just the very precise segment that you want to use without having to fast forward or, you know, find the part of the video in the middle of a training. You know, it just saves time. I often like to create a little storyboard if a video advertisement involves, is maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds, and several different characters are involved. So if I play it once, I might stop and then show them a couple of freeze frames and say, okay, what do you think this person was doing? Or what is the woman trying to sell? Or why did this person react the way he or she did? And try to get them more involved in the actual story of the commercial. You also
Dennis, can I interrupt you for a second? Yes, because we have a first question, so I would like to address it. We have a question from Manuela, and it's, can you re-give the extensions to download the videos?
I'm sorry, can I do what?
Can you re-give the extensions to download the videos?
Can I re-give? I mean, I don't...
Give. Re-give.
Okay. Can I give them? What's it? Do you mean...
Manuela, if you could write a little more on your intentions with this question, I think it would help us. What?
You want me to write down the names of the specific... so one would be YouTube Downloader, and the video editing tool that I used is called Snagit, S-N-A-G-I-T.
I will write it in the...
That's a paid, however, that is a paid software tool. It's not terribly expensive, but that's one that is not free. Whereas YouTube, there are a number of downloadable not browsers, but there are a number of applications that you can download for free. But if you want a good video editing software, it's usually maybe around $30, 25 euros. Did that answer your question?
Bastian is also sharing information that if you have a Mac, there's one for free on it.
Okay.
Okay, Camilla is asking, are there any issues with copyrights?
It depends on, for example, is what you're showing actually a commercial? The first one we'll be looking at actually is not a commercial in terms of trying to sell a specific product. But my feeling is that I'm giving these companies or these products free advertising. I mean, I'm promoting their product to a group of potential customers. So I don't really see why there would be any particular objection to my broadcasting one of their advertisements.
My proposition, guys, is to leave the discussion on the law of sharing movies till the end of the presentation. If we have time, we can share how it looks like in our countries, because I know it can differ. And let's resume to the to the presentation.
Move on with the actual content. Okay, so just know that you can, if you do freeze frame, you have a number of options for improving the quality of the video. But let's talk about how to exploit, how to make the best use out of an advertisement. So there are different techniques or methods to make the most out of what I call a high context advertisement. You often have the choice of playing it with no sound and just seeing the interaction, the nonverbal language. Sometimes if there are subtitles, and I think the subtitle might give away too much of the story, I actually take something to actually cover the bottom of my screen, or I find a way to not let them see it. I usually stop the advertisement the first time towards the middle or towards the end and let them know, well, what do you think is going to happen next? And as I said, if the story has several characters, I use 3 or 4 images, freeze frame, that I'll put on the next PowerPoint slide and try to get them more involved in the story for the second viewing. So freeze framing a specific point in the commercial lets you highlight an action that they might, these advertisements sometimes are 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and so things happen very quickly. And for Chinese or Japanese viewers, they don't need to think about what the person is doing. They catch it very quickly. But for us, in a classroom context, it's often useful to freeze frame it and then try to elicit curiosity or questions about a specific moment within a video commercial. So this is just one of the images that I thought, well, it's a little bit dark. It takes place at night. And so with the videoing tool, I wanted to highlight the woman's face in the background, and I added some light to the image. Okay, so why are we using advertisements and what are the benefits? Because they're short. So you could actually use 3 or 4 and talk about them for maybe half an hour. Participants get a real view of what's going on in the culture. It's something really living, alive for them. And they also get to sense what are the key or the core values of a particular culture. It's what I call in intercultural terms the bottom of the cultural iceberg, things that you don't immediately see. This is important if you're in a culture where the communication preference is more high context. So, if you're doing the intercultural theory and you're explaining high context or low context, you can do a high context Japanese or Chinese commercial to give them a better understanding, not so theoretical, but a real understanding of what exactly that means. When they actually see people in their everyday lives and interactions, it also helps them move beyond some kinds of stereotypes that they often have. I often choose television commercials where you get a sense of humor. I don't know why, but for many Asian cultures, I hear Europeans and Americans say, oh, Japanese people, they don't have any sense of humor. Oh, Chinese people, they have no sense of humor. And I think, well, that's ridiculous. And so I don't know where that idea comes from. So I often will choose a commercial where something amusing happens. It's also, I've chosen television commercials that explore taboos. I often get asked, well, what should we really avoid doing? Are there certain topics, that we should not talk about where we might make a very negative impression of people? And so some of the commercials I've chosen explore some social taboos. And it's also sometimes interesting to see if and why foreigners are used in a culture. And it gives some idea of how the local people perceive people from another country or another culture. So I talked about the bottom of a cultural iceberg, what's called the deep culture. And these are opportunities to let people get a sense of what are the real values of a culture? What are their beliefs and types of behavior? Things that they might not immediately be aware of. So the first advertisement we're going to listen to or watch is Chinese, and I want to set the context for it. This is not fully a commercial. It's more what I would call a piece of propaganda, in the sense that this commercial was made by the government, by the Chinese government, for the Spring Gala, the Spring Gala, which is for the Chinese New Year. And on the eve of the Chinese New Year, there's this huge television variety show, which is the most watched television program in the world. So according to statistics, 700 million people in China watch this television program called the Spring Gala, the Spring Gala. And it's broadcast on 4 different Chinese television stations. And according to government statistics, 93.6% of Chinese people watch this show. And so the idea of the Chinese New Year is that all of the young people or people who are working in different parts of China, they come home to their families, and it's this kind of ritual where the television is on, they all turn on the Spring Gala, and it's the commercials that come on just before the Spring Gala are the most watched commercials. And the government uses this opportunity because it has the attention of all these people. And so in 2014, this is the commercial, the advertisement that the Chinese people were able to see.
好味道啊！
今朝妈妈教侬用筷子吃饭，好伐？这样子拿筷子。
我要这样不行了，怎么办？
阿拉是中国人，中国人就要用筷子。哎，好，吃到了吗？
哦，餐饮单啊，当先生，好，好，大家万岁姨。哎，回来了，妈，我回来了。
这回回来多住些点吧啊。
行。
就知道你爱吃这个。
哎呀，走，我们一起来。让你主席的，哎呀，我是晓得主席跟你说，多个人多双筷子走嘛呀。
吃啥子嘛？多双筷子噻。今天过年，高兴高兴。
我想你们说。
Okay, so that was a rather lovely, very poignant kind of commercial, and I think it moved a lot of Chinese people. The topic was actually chopsticks. And that might seem like a strange topic. Like, why would the government spend so much money and so much time and energy putting together a commercial on chopsticks? I'm just wondering if I ask you that question, if we might get a quick answer. Does that seem like a strange topic? Chopsticks for a television commercial? Agnieszka?
We have the first response. So we have hygiene, maybe more people. Oh my God, you're writing so fast. Maybe more people are using forks. Healthy eating, create community, because everybody uses them every day. Return to basic values, to promote and celebrate Chineseness. It wasn't about the chopstick. That was just a hang-up to create identity, symbolic value.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Traditions. Oh my. I'm sorry. I'm not able to read all as you're writing so much.
And I'm sorry to cut the comment short because we have so many commercials to get to. But I think the person hit the nail on the head when he or she said, because they're not using them as much as they used to. So it's a part of the government saying, wait a minute, you're Chinese. It's what the father says to the mother says to the little girl. You're Chinese, dear. We have to learn how to use chopsticks. So it's interesting because on one hand, you see the different scenes of how local Chinese people celebrate New Year's with having a big meal and setting off the fireworks, and that sets the environment. But there's also kind of, let's not forget, despite all of this globalization and all of this tremendous interest in Western culture, we're still Chinese, and Chinese people use chopsticks. You know, I also think it was on a deeper level, the government is saying, we're Chinese people and we live in communities and we're supposed to look after each other and care for each other. It's a kind of collectivism in Chinese culture. And I think the government feels like if people become too materialistic and too individualistic, then what happens to Chinese culture? Okay. I hate to cut the conversation short on such an interesting commercial because I could speak easily for half an hour on it, but I would like to move on to different ones. Okay, so this commercial raises the interesting issue of to what extent does an Asian culture embrace Western values? Is there a point where they say, no, okay, we can copy this, or we can buy this, you know, we can buy German cars and we can start to eat, you know, French food and buy baguettes or whatever. But at what point do we say stop and it starts to threaten our own way of life and our own values? Are signs of globalization just on the surface? And then you start to say, well, explain how deeper values are actually quite important, although they might not be immediately visible to people who come to live and work in the country. So what are the limits and the level of tolerance for behaviors which challenge traditions? So my next television commercial is also Chinese and explores a taboo. Wait, no. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. Just a moment.
别和陌生人说话，别做新鲜事，继续过平常的生活。胆小一点，别好奇，就玩你会的。离冒险远远的，有些事想想就好，没必要改变。待在熟悉的地方，最好待在家里，听一样的音乐，见一样的人，重复同样的话题，心思别太活，梦想要实际，不要什么都尝试，就这样活着吧。
Good. Okay. You have a lot of images, one after the other. You have a Chinese woman saying things. Does anyone have an idea what this is a commercial for? Agnieszka?
I'm waiting. Yes, we're waiting. Progress.
It's a commercial for something specific.
A new mobile device, a university, cell phones, an application. tampons, traditions, new fashion, travel, be creative and take risks.
Okay, so thank you. I hate to cut the comments short, but in the interest of time to move forward, this is actually a dating app. So it's Chinese people are meeting each other increasingly through dating applications called Momo. The company spent a lot of money making this television commercial, and the government stepped in and said, no, this is not the image, this is not the kind of behavior from young people that we want to encourage. So this commercial was actually censored by the government. The government said no. And you hear the voice of a young Chinese woman, you know, keep your dreams practical, stay at home, stay in familiar places, you know, keep repeating the same conversations you've had. This is what young people often hear from their parents, and they're tired of hearing these kinds of keep your dreams practical kind of talk. And so, you know, you see young Chinese people doing certain things that their parents, and more specifically, the government doesn't want to encourage. So I'm really sorry that we don't have time to replay these television commercials, but at one point, you see a young man climbing a lamppost. Now, I've been to China many, many times, and I can't imagine a young person actually doing that. I think there would be a policeman behind, you know, in less than half a minute, you know, to put a stop to that. They don't want that kind of social unrest and young people acting that with that amount of freedom. So this is what I'm talking about. A television commercial gives people some sense of, well, you know, where are the limits? To what extent, you know, are certain behaviors encouraged or really frowned upon? So I know that when you do an expatriation seminar, for example, people often say, well, what are the do's and don'ts? And they want a simple kind of checklist. And I don't always think that's a good idea. Nevertheless, there are taboos in every culture, every society, and actions or topics which, you know, are pretty sensitive. So the last Chinese commercial we're going to do, well, let's take a listen to it or watch this one.
爸，让对话更有温度。Make it 飞。
This commercial, I said it was Chinese, but I should be a little bit more specific. Actually, it's a Taiwanese from Taiwan. If you recognize the Chinese characters, they're in traditional characters. And I do not think this kind of commercial could be shown in mainland China. There's been a lot of progress made on gay rights in Taiwan and slowly in mainland China. I don't think mainland China is ready for this kind of commercial. Nevertheless, I like this commercial a lot because it's very nonverbal. In fact, it's not towards maybe until 60% of the commercial, has, I guess we watch about 40 seconds of a 1-minute commercial until we actually hear some music. But everything is nonverbal, the kinds of communication that takes place. The faces tend to be very expressive. And when you don't speak a word of Chinese or Japanese or the language, the faces tell the story. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this commercial before I move on?
Yes, we have some comments regarding that it will not be possible in mainland China. But we had a comment that it would be a great commercial in Poland. I agreed with that.
There was a similar commercial in France. McDonald's did a very similar commercial.
Then we also have a question. Patty is saying, I like it a lot, but it really cheapens a very tough issue, I think. Would Taiwanese not see it this way?
I think always have to wonder what are the real motives behind doing this kind of advertisement. Is it, let's try to move society forward on a specific issue, or let's try to capture a potential market, or make an appeal to young people? And I think it's not always very clear what a company's motives would be in making such a long commercial where, the product is not really highlighted. However, this commercial is very typical. It's a very typical Asian commercial in the sense that the product does not hit you in the face. It's the story, that has much more of more interest. You have to wonder, well, what's going on between the father and the son? It's a human story, and the product is sort of introduced casually, and this is typical for a lot of Asian cultures. So
Dennis had a question. I will just ask it because some people were asking whether it was really where was it shown in Taiwan.
I can't answer that question. In all honesty, I don't know. I would think that it was basically broadcast all over Taiwan. I mean, it's not that big of a country, and I would think that I really don't want to commit myself to an answer because I just don't know
exactly.
What stations or what how commercials are broadcast.
We have another question. What would be necessary to be allowed to broadcast this commercial on mainland media?
That's an excellent question. And Chinese people themselves don't know the answer to that question. What gets past the censors is often a mystery to Chinese people themselves. What some people are allowed to put on the internet or on a blog, and what other seemingly innocent or harmless things are immediately censored. I won't say it's haphazard, but I think it's a mystery to Chinese people themselves. I don't think that the company that made the dating application commercial expected their commercial to be censored. So you're asking a question that, millions and millions of Chinese people are asking themselves. Okay. To move away from China and into a little bit more intercultural theory, I talked about in a typically Asian television commercial, they tend to be high context versus a high content commercial, which might be from Germany or the United States. In a high context, what do we have? Or what did we have in the previous commercial that we just saw? Frequent and strong nonverbal cues, reserved and inward reactions, in-group and out-group are clearly defined, strong ties to group community, and family. So in the chopsticks commercial, we saw the importance of family and community. The same in this commercial, the father-son relationship was key, and a high commitment to long-term relationships. You know, if the father had walked away in anger, clearly the young boy would have been emotionally destroyed. On the other hand, on a high content commercial, there's more focus on verbal communication. The father and the son did not speak to each other. They had to write things down. It was rather strange. Visible, from my point of view, as an American, I see that as rather strange. That's my cultural bias. But visible, external, and outward reactions are very clear. You look at the father's face in the McDonald's commercial, it's really hard to see exactly what he's thinking or feeling. It's more subtle, you know. Group affiliation is flexible, changeable, and the task is more important than the relationship. To make this a little bit clearer, and you might want to do this in an intercultural training, is to give them a very high content communication, high content advertisement. Going from China to France, a French television commercial recently came out, and it's also a non-verbal there's no talking whatsoever in it. And I would just like to play this for you. Okay, I'm stopping this commercial here, which is what I would do when I was, if I were to use this in a training talking about France. So instead of asking you, what do you think this is a commercial for, what values from the interaction that you've seen does this say about French culture? Can we just, Agnieszka, could you?
Manners, we have the first response. Hierarchy, the importance of meals, savoir-vivre, high power, the father as the head of the family. Assumptions. To revolt is just. Possibly to resist authority.
Right, yeah. So thank you. I'm sorry to cut the answer short again. Yes, I think the whole idea is the French Revolution within the family. I mean, you have a very clearly.
We have I'm sorry, we have the comment. Vive la Révolution. So, sorry,
Vive la
Révolution.
Wrote it. C'est la Révolution française that keeps coming back and again, even today, and even within small groups or even within the family. I mean, what a contrast to a Chinese commercial where the family is always shown together and smiling and loving and supporting each other. We have three family members who've left the table, you know, and a French attitudes towards authority. So I'm not going to ask you, because we'd spend the rest of the webinar trying to guess what the commercial is for. Let's move forward just a moment. And during this time in the kitchen,
all you need is to shout out loud. See how you believe, it's all around. Une envie de concert improvisé? Retrouvez tous vos divertissements sur l'écran du nouveau réfrigérateur Samsung Family Hub.
So it turns out to be an advertisement for a refrigerator and by Samsung, and it says, well, you're in the mood for sort of an improvised concert, you know, we'll just go into the kitchen and, you know, play this music, or, you know, it's sort of selling the technology, the special technology where there's a a computer screen on your kitchen, and that's going to make things so much more fun. And so you have the young kids and the mother bored to tears in the dining room, and then just having a wonderful time dancing and laughing in front of this wonderful Samsung Family Hub commercial. So this commercial was rather unusual in that for a French commercial, there's not so much is made of silence. In general, there's more talking.
Dennis, we just have one question. Is there a favorite source of TV commercials?
There's a French television program that was on the air called Culture Pub, where they would actually take the best commercials from around the world and broadcast them. Often they were rather humorous. I find most of my television commercials on YouTube, and I download. Some people have put together videos where they show the funniest Japanese commercials 2015, and you look in that way. I don't mean to cut the answer short to that question, but time is passing so quickly. I often use the Hofstede model with the 5 dimensions, and I ask them after seeing the commercial maybe once to find what aspect: power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism or collectivism, masculinity or femininity. Which of these 5 dimensions is really very much an evidence? And I use that as a talking point. Implicit versus explicit communication. This actually has a business use when you're dealing with business people. What if you are coming from a culture that's very high content, and people are just encouraged to be very explicit and precise with what they mean, and they're wanting to do business in a culture where communication tends to be more implicit. These are points that you need to stress for them. That more time is taken on building relationships, and if people are too forward in trying to, on a business issue, they're going to lose the trust of the people that they want to do business with. And I've seen this happen just dozens and dozens of times. A very quick example of a very explicit, high content commercial we have right here.
Meet Mrs. Ann Cuneo of Harvard, Massachusetts. She's going to tell a story that might shake up a lot of your ideas about washing clothes.
Well, it all began when I threw this old favorite jersey of mine reluctantly into the rag drawer because of a hopeless stain. I used it for polishing, mopping up dirt, spills. One day I was doing a load of rags with some Tide that I had gotten on special. When I took the jersey out, I couldn't believe it. The dirt and stains were out, and, well, it was clean enough to wear again. Then I saw it wasn't Tide I used, it was Tide XK. I've used Tide XK ever since, even when it's not on special. And my whole wash is cleaner and whiter than I ever thought it could be.
Incredible Tide XK with stain-removing XK enzymes. It's so powerful, it soaks out stains while it washes out dirt. And if you don't believe it, get in touch with Mrs. Cuneo at 800-221-7370.
I have to wonder how many people actually called Mrs. Cuneo at the end of the commercial when this was aired in the 1970s. It makes Americans laugh today because it's so heavy-handed. It's so in your face. You cannot, for a second, question what the commercial is about. The box of detergent is full screen, and they're talking about Tide XK. And this very explicit, in-your-face kind of communication style, many Asians find very offensive. Okay, so you may have seen the chart where they list countries where communication patterns are high context, and we saw Japan at the very top, with China just below it. France actually is just in the middle, and as we go down, you have Germany, the Netherlands, and Swiss Germans. So Americans are more high content than high context. And France seems to be right in the middle. And I'm just looking at my time, and we're going to have to skip a few commercials, unfortunately, to watch a mystery. This is the mystery commercial, and I'll play it and I'll stop it at the very end because you might have a difficult time figuring out what it's about.
いつまで続くんだろうな、こんなこと。さあな。泣いてんのか？別に。地震だ！地震だ！
Does anyone have an idea? Has anyone seen this commercial? It was quite popular in Japan. Does anyone have an idea what it might be about?
3D cinema. IMAX cinema.
No.
Roof tiles.
Oh, yes. Very good.
Amusement
well done.
park ride. Insurance company. Video game.
This is actually roof tiles. Standing strong together.
Syria, roofing tiles.
Okay, it's a clever commercial, but what do you think it says about Japanese culture in general? What are some of the dimensions, Hofstede dimensions that can be, emphasized in this?
We have collectivism, collective, yeah.
It also, I'm just worried that we're running out of time.
We also have.
One interesting aspect or dimension that I thought should be used as well is in Japanese culture. Japanese culture has a very high masculinity index. What does that mean specifically? Or we could also talk about power index. There's this image of the Japanese male not supposed to be soft or tender or giving or sharing. There's also, in culture, it's a very culture-specific concept, but called gaman, the ability to endure. It actually comes from Zen Buddhism, but it's this idea that if you're a Japanese male, you're not supposed to cry, for example, and you see the man starting to cry, no, I'm not crying. We're in this together, and I must stay strong. You know, so you might use that commercial to actually give an example when you say that Japan has a very high masculinity index, is very high on that level. Do we have time, Agnieszka, for one more commercial? Because I'm just worried that there won't be enough time for questions at the end.
People already are answering yes, so I guess they want to see some more.
Okay, we're going to see one more commercial because I don't want to go too over time. This is a commercial with a Japanese woman, and we actually see Japanese man and a woman interacting. So let's.
やめろよ。
しばらく見てていいですか？
やめろよ。恋は遠い日の花火ではない。オールドイズニュー。新しいオールド1980円。
Okay, Okay, this commercial is actually one of maybe 20 or 25 commercials that were shot with the same two characters. If we had time, I would give you this quiz and I would ask you questions like, excuse me, what's the relationship between the man and the woman? Is it a boss talking to his secretary? Are there two newlyweds here? Excuse me. Why does the man...
We have the question, a comment that it's Western suit and whiskey, and Japan is world leader on whiskey, but is it traditional?
What is traditional is that the Japanese drink quite a bit. The verb to drink in Japanese is nomu, N-O-M-U. And the word that they use a lot in English is called communication. So the Japanese have created a new word called no-munication, which does not mean no communication. It means drinking and communicating. And actually, drinking is a very important form of doing business in Japan. To give you the quick answers, this is an ongoing story about a boss with his secretary, and his secretary actually is in love with him and keeps following him. But he knows that because he's older, this is a relationship that can never actually, come to be. So he is always always has this kind of Japanese mask, this kind of sad feeling. And he cannot express because he really likes this young woman, but Japanese men and women do not communicate that openly or that easily with each other. So why does the man jump at the very end of this advertisement? Because he's happy, but he cannot express his genuine open feelings in front of the woman. And Japanese people really identify with that situation. If you know something specific about Japanese culture, it's called tatemae and honne. Tatemae is the mask that you wear, what stands in front of you. So tate is a verb, to stand. Mae is a preposition, in front of. And so it's the face that you have to wear. It's the mask that you have to wear in certain social situations. You can't express your genuine feelings. And when the woman goes away, or when she turns or leaves, and he jumps in the air at the end, all by himself on the street, that's the honne. That's the genuine feeling coming out, which is quite difficult for Japanese people to be spontaneous and open about their feelings. And what's interesting about this advertisement, or actually what's typical, is the fact that you only see the whiskey just for 2 seconds at the beginning and then at the end. And then you see some very strange English that says old is new, which makes no sense, right? I lived in Japan for 4 years, and I saw funny English or strange English every day. And at some point it dawned on me that, this English is not really for transmitting information. It's just sort of decorative. And the fact that words put together, the fact that those words don't make sense was a problem for me, for my culture, but it didn't really bother Japanese people. It's okay, it's Japanese English. And we like to use English because it gives our product a kind of international, appeal. It makes it seem more better because there's a sprinkling of kinds of silly English words. But I think that whole idea that in Japan, when English is used, it's not necessarily to convey a specific idea. A very important point to bring up, even more than bring up, is to develop in an intercultural training. And I'm looking at my watch.
The time is almost up, but I will ask you one question that was asked before. I just was waiting for the end, but we had a question. What are the search terms you use in order to, as I understood, find those commercials? If I'm mistaken, please correct me, but I guess Bastian was asking about this.
Well, actually, if you're looking for non-Chinese television commercials, YouTube, you could just do, you know, Germany advertisements, you know, just some random. I mean, I would go into YouTube first of all, and then I would, you know, type in the country name and just TV adverts and see what comes up. If you're doing it if you want to use Google Translate and translate that into Japanese or Chinese, and then do a web search on, you know, the Chinese internet, then you might get different. Then you might get different results, because YouTube it has been censored in China, and there are equivalents to that. So there are ways of finding Chinese television commercials that are not on YouTube. It does not have to be your sole source for finding material on it. So I feel like I've not done justice on, because I could speak for half a day on Japanese television commercials, because they're so rich, they're so interesting. But it's already 8 o'clock, and I guess I wanted to close with, I hope that I've not gone too quickly, and I hope you're not too frustrated.
We already have a request for a part 2. So
I think that's very kind of you. Maybe I could do just a webinar on Japanese television commercials. I think I would could easily spend an hour on that.
Well, thank you very much. The comments, you will read it yourself in a second. It was absolutely amazing. I speak for myself, but reading the comments, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people. So thank you very much. We have a request regarding whether you could create a list of commercials and what they can be used for, whether you could maybe provide something like this. I'm not asking you to answer right now, but if that would be possible, one of the participants is asking about this. So thank you very much. Thank you all for participation and all your comments.
Thank you for coming on a Friday evening.
Yes, and we invite you to participate in the webinars next year. We have a full plan ready, so please subscribe to the new events. One more time, thank you very much, and
thank you for having me. I have enjoyed it.
Good night, good day, good morning, depends on where you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Denis.
My pleasure.